Darlene, you're on mute still, just so you know.
Oh,
Thank
there
you.
we go. Talk about computers not working for you. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Okay, I'm here. Amy, thanks, Amy, for popping in at the last minute. I understand. Really appreciate your assistance in that regard. Amy is a registered dietitian from the Grand River Community Health Center. In this role, she supports clients one-on-one and facilitates group programming throughout Brant, and Norfolk. She earned her master's in foods and nutrition from Brescia University College, Western University, and has experience working as a dietitian at a family health team and in home care. Amy is passionate about sharing evidence-based nutrition information and helping others develop healthy relationships with food. She supports clients in making sustainable lifestyle changes to improve both their physical and mental health. Outside of her professional life, Amy enjoys reading, baking, and being active by hiking or dancing. So during her presentation, Amy will discuss heart healthy eating in honor of Heart Month. She will provide an overview of the Mediterranean way of eating and practical tips to help you follow this eating pattern in your own life. The Mediterranean way of eating has been shown to not only improve cardiovascular health, but also blood sugars, inflammation, and much more. Away you go, Amy. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that last piece was just for the heart health presentation.
Ah,
Not this one, but the information still applies. And one thing I should have added as well, as per our discussion before this presentation, is another hobby of mine is pickleball, like so many of you on the call today. Yeah, so thank you for joining this presentation today. I'll be talking all about nutrition and brain health. So first I'll speak about the role of nutrition in brain health and really why. Why is nutrition helpful for brain health? And then I'll discuss dietary patterns for brain health, recommended foods and foods to limit, supplements for brain health, and then I'll conclude with two recipes that, kind of combine some of these components of healthy eating for brain health. So starting off the role of nutrition in brain health. So first off is structure. Um, so about 75% of the brain is water. So when we look at the dry weight, about 50 to 60% of that dry weight is comprised of fats. So interestingly, of the dry weight, most of our brain is fat. And omega-3 fatty acids are particularly prominent in the brain. And so different types of omega-3 fats are known as EPA, DHA, and ALA. We'll talk a little bit more about those later. There's no need to remember those. But the DHA and the EPA particularly make up the brain. Protein is another structural component of the brain. Just from what I was looking at online, it's about 8%. So protein, fats, are kind of a couple of the main things that we talk about in terms of nutrition for the brain. And then we have fuel. So this is where our carbohydrates come in. So the brain uses approximately 20% of calories consumed. So if we have 2,000 calories in a day, that's about 400 calories just going to the brain. So that fact personally surprised me, because the brain is only like 1.5 kilograms. It's such a small part of our body that uses so much fuel. And it prefers glucose for energy. And glucose primarily comes from the carbohydrates that we eat. It can come from fats and proteins, but the preferred source is carbohydrates, and it will use those first to make glucose. So it's important that we eat regularly and enough food to provide the brain with the fuel it needs, manage blood sugar levels, and support mood. So that's how we give our brain a regular supply of the glucose it needs to function properly. So generally, we recommend eating every 2 to 4 hours. You may experience you may be hangry if you don't eat regularly. You might have noticed that. You may become a bit irritable, have trouble concentrating, things like that. I was showing this presentation to my boyfriend, and he said that he wholeheartedly agrees with that I get very hangry when I haven't eaten. So I said, thanks for that. Um, but, just emphasizing that point that it is important to eat regularly and fuel our brains. And another interesting fact is that when we don't fuel our brain, when we don't eat enough carbohydrates, but also other foods like those fats and proteins, um, for example, in like certain eating disorders, the brain can actually shrink in size. So when it doesn't get that fuel it needs, we see a smaller brain. In terms of other nutrients that support the process of providing fuel to the brain, we have B vitamins. So examples are thiamine, folate, vitamin B12. We also have magnesium and other nutrients as well. Long story short, these just kind of help turn the glucose into usable energy. I won't get into the specifics. We also have function. So nutrition plays a role in brain function. So, for example, it can help produce neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters are just the chemical messengers in the brain that, help to send messages to other parts of the brain and body. And so, if we look at that image, those little circles in the middle and between the two pink pieces, those would be the neurotransmitters sending messages. Examples include like dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine. Maybe some of those are words that you've heard before. And so key nutrients involved in neurotransmitter production and function include B vitamins, again, choline, which is similar to a B vitamin. It's one that doesn't get talked about enough. I feel like a lot of people don't know what choline is, but it's very important for the brain. Vitamin C, vitamin D, and as we go through this presentation, we're going to talk about different foods that are high in each of these nutrients. I just wanted to let you know now kind of what their function is. Then we'll talk about how to get them in your diet a little bit later. We also have protection. So the brain is exposed to stress and damage over time, and antioxidants can help to protect the brain from that stress and damage. So vitamins A, C, and E are antioxidants. Other nutrients such as selenium and zinc help to make antioxidants in the brain as well. And then finally, we have the gut-brain axis. So this one has been getting a lot of traction, like online and in research recently. So the gut-brain axis is a bidirectional connection between the brain and the digestive tract. And so nutrients such as fiber that promote a healthy gut can promote a healthy brain through this connection. Similarly, maybe when we're feeling anxious, sad, stressed, that might impact our digestive system or what we eat. So again, it's that two-way connection between the gut and the brain. So now that brings me to dietary patterns for brain health. So we talked about, some of the things like nutrition can help with brain structure, fuel, function, protection through the gut-brain axis, all that kind of stuff. So now we're going to get into the more practical, well, what can we do, to get these nutrients and to help our brain? So dietary patterns. So 3 dietary patterns have been shown to potentially have a beneficial effect on brain health and slowing cognitive decline. And these are the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, and the MIND diet. So I'm going to provide an overview of these 3 diets. I would recommend, if you're looking for more detail on the Mediterranean DASH diets, that you check out my Heart Healthy eating webinar that I did for the Grand River Council on Aging, because I provide a lot more depth on those in that presentation. So because I maybe guessed that some of you did attend that one, I won't go into as much detail today. So the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet reflects the eating habits of those who border the Mediterranean Sea. It's often recommended for heart health, but it can also be beneficial for brain health and lots of other areas. So this is the Mediterranean diet pyramid. And so if we look at the bottom of the pyramid first, we have physical activity and enjoying meals with others. So it's important to be active often and eat with others. So it's not just about the food that we eat, it's a lifestyle. And then as we go up the pyramid, these are the foods that we want the most of. So fruits, veg, vegetables, grains, especially whole grains, olive oil, beans, nuts, legumes, seeds, herbs, and spices. So we want these, pretty much for every meal, a lot of these variety of foods, lots of servings throughout the day. Then as we go up the pyramid, we have fish and seafood. We want to consume these often, at least twice a week. Then we have poultry and eggs, cheese and yogurt. It's important to consume these in moderation. And then finally, as we reach the very top of the pyramid, we have meats and sweets. We want to limit these and have them less often. And then on the left-hand side, we see wine and water. So the Mediterranean way of eating recommends making water your drink of choice, and you can consume wine in moderation, but that's optional if you don't drink. Then we have the DASH diet. So the DASH diet stands for the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension diet. So hypertension means high blood pressure. So the DASH diet was designed to help lower blood pressure. It limits sodium intake to less than 2,300 milligrams per day, or even less than that. So it has that emphasis on really reducing sodium. And it emphasizes whole foods, very similar to the Mediterranean way of eating. So fruits, vegetables, whole grains, low-fat dairy products, and lean proteins. Compared to the Mediterranean diet, it has more of an emphasis on lean proteins and less of an emphasis on fish. It also doesn't emphasize olive oil as much, but at the heart, the two are very similar. And it limits foods such as fatty meats and sweets as well. So then that brings me to the MIND diet. And so the MIND diet is still pretty recent. I think it's been around for about 10 years or so. So we're still seeing a lot more research on it. But the MIND diet stands for the Mediterranean Dash Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. So that's a mouthful, but it pretty much means it's a combination of the Mediterranean and DASH diets that was designed and researched to help slow cognitive decline. So the MIND diet really emphasizes foods that are high in antioxidants, which, as I mentioned earlier, are very protective. They help fight against that stress, damage, and inflammation in the brain and other parts of the body as well. The MIND diet emphasizes 10 main foods to consume often and 5 foods to limit. And some of them are more like food groups, but we'll talk about those in more detail. So, of the 10 foods to limit, 10 foods to consume, we have dark leafy green vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, berries, whole grains, nuts and seeds, legumes, seafood, poultry, olive oil, and wine, which again is optional. There's, risks to drinking as well, so it's personal preference. And a combination of these foods is most beneficial. So it can be helpful to combine these different foods into similar meals as it has a synergistic effect. So all the nutrients work together for the greatest benefit. And then there's 5 foods to limit. So we have our red meats, butter and stick margarine. So this isn't the margarine like Becel that comes in a tub. This is like hard margarine that comes like in a block. cheese, which is always a kind of a surprising one, fried or fast foods, and pastries and sweets. So we're going to go into all of these foods that are recommended by the Mind Diet, as well as a few others that I've added just because they are beneficial for brain health, and then also some foods to limit. So we're going to go into more depth now over the next few minutes and talk about serving sizes and things like that. So, key recommended foods. So, first off are green leafy vegetables. This includes arugula, spinach, kale. Ideally, we want a darker color of the greens. That's because the color pigments in fruits and vegetables have a very strong antioxidant effect. And so, again, very protective for the brain. We get more benefits. So that's why some of those darker greens are recommended. In terms of serving sizes, aim to consume 1 cup raw or half a cup cooked green leafy vegetables 6 or 7 times per week. And so these are high in B vitamins, antioxidants, fiber, again, for that gut brain axis. And I just want to say you don't have to eat a salad every day. You can if you really love salad, but you can switch it up. Variety is important. For example, you could buy frozen spinach or, fresh and throw that into a smoothie or throw greens into an omelet or pasta sauce or lasagna. You can cook it down. You can get really creative, or you could make a flatbread and add arugula on top. It doesn't have to be just a salad. And then we have our berries. Again, very high in antioxidants. They include blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, and strawberries. Aim to eat at least half a cup of berries at least 2 to 3 times per week because of those antioxidants and fiber. Again, you can add them to smoothies, cereals, yogurt, oatmeal, or just eat them on their own. Salads as well. And then we have our non-starchy vegetables and fruits. So we want to eat a variety of non-starchy vegetables each day. So starchy vegetables are things like potatoes, squash, pumpkin. It's not that these foods are bad, they're still good to include, but the Mind Diet just really emphasizes having non-starchy vegetables as well. Also consume fruit daily, other than berries as well. And eat the rainbow. As I mentioned, all those different color pigments are important for antioxidants. So it can be good to have fruits and vegetables with every meal. If we think about like our healthy plate, fruits and vegetables make up about half of our plate. Then we have whole grains. So whole grains include barley, brown rice, oatmeal, quinoa, whole grain bread, and whole grain pasta. Keep in mind, whole grain is not necessarily the same as whole wheat or multigrain. So if you're looking at a label of cereal, bread, pasta, etc., you always want to look for the words whole grain or whole grain whole wheat, because it could be whole wheat, but not whole grain whole wheat. And so it's missing some of the benefits and the fiber when it's not whole grain. Same with multigrain, it could just be multiple white grains. So something to look for on the label. Aim to eat at least 3 servings or more of whole grains per day. And a serving size depends on the food. So, for example, 1 serving is half a cup cooked quinoa or pasta, for example. Most of us eat a lot more than 1 serving of pasta. Um, 1 slice of bread would be a serving. Those are just some examples. They're high in B vitamins and magnesium, which are important for that neurotransmitter production and function, selenium and zinc, which help make antioxidants, and fiber, again, for that gut brain axis. Nuts and seeds. These include almonds, walnuts, cashews, pumpkin seeds, and more. Aim to consume a 1/4 cup, which is about the size of like a handful, 5 to 7 times per week. They're high in B vitamins, magnesium, zinc, and fiber. Legumes. So foods like black beans, chickpeas, red kidney beans, peas, and lentils. Aim to eat half a cup of legumes 2 to 4 times per week. They're high in B vitamins, magnesium, fiber, also protein, which we talked about, helps make up the structure of the brain. Again, you can get creative with the way that you use legumes in your diet. For example, you can add them to salads and soups, or you could make a lentil meatloaf, or add lentils to ground meat in tacos, or you can add legumes to pasta sauce. There's lots of fun ways that you can eat them. You can also have hummus with crackers or veggies. So again, you can make things fun and include variety. And then we have soy. So soy is one that I added that's not part of the Mind diet, but it can be really beneficial for brain health. It includes edamame, soybeans, soy nuts, soy beverage, and tofu. It's high in antioxidants, B vitamins, magnesium, zinc, and protein. But the reason that I wanted to include it in particular was because of those antioxidants. So there's a component in soy, it's called isoflavones. Long story short, they have a very strong antioxidant effect, which helps fight against that inflammation. I also added eggs. So eggs are particularly high in choline. As I mentioned earlier, choline doesn't get talked about enough, but eggs are one of the foods that have the highest amount of choline. And choline helps to support like the production of cell membranes in the brain, and it also helps to make the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. I don't want to get too technical, but acetylcholine helps with memory. It also helps with muscle function and more. So a few eggs a week, would likely be beneficial. Low-fat dairy products. These include milk, yogurt, kefir, however you pronounce it. They're high in vitamin B12, which is one of those B vitamins, vitamin D, which is also supportive for the brain, and protein. Fermented dairy, so think of yogurt, the kefir, it's made with bacteria. It's particularly beneficial for digestive health, which again can support the brain because of that gut-brain axis. We also have fish and seafood. Aim to eat 2 to 3 servings of fish and seafood each week. One serving is about 3 ounces, which is about the size of the palm of your hand or a deck of cards. Fatty fish in particular are high in omega-3 fatty acids and include salmon, trout, herring, and sardines. So omega-3s are not only anti-inflammatory, they also help make up that structure of the brain. And that's where we find the EPA and DHA that I talked about earlier. We can't find those nutrients really elsewhere other than in fish and seafood and algae. And we have poultry as well. So this is part of the Mind diet. It includes chicken, turkey. Choose poultry more often than red meats. Consume poultry at least twice a week. It's high in protein and other beneficial nutrients. And finally, we have olive oil. Choose olive oil as the main source of fat when cooking. Extra virgin olive oil is particularly recommended because it's higher in antioxidants. Something that's important to remember too, olive oil doesn't have a super high smoke point. So what that means is if it reaches too high of a temperature, it will start to smoke, and produce that smoke in the oven, for example. And that kind of ruins some of the beneficial qualities of the olive oil. So the smoke point is around 410 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's best to use olive oil in like lower heat cooking, like fine in the oven on 350 or 375, or use it in a stir fry. You could use it as a salad dressing, etc. So foods to limit. So limit red and processed meats, including beef, pork, bacon, sausage. So 1 to 3 servings per week. And one serving is about 3 ounces, again, the size of the palm of your hand or a deck of cards. Limit butter and stick margarine to less than 1 tablespoon per day, or even less than 1 tablespoon per week. Limit fried or fast foods to once per week, and limit highly processed foods, including baked goods, potato chips, and pop, to 3 to 4 servings per week or less. You might be wondering, well, what is a serving size of those foods? It depends on the food. And so it will say on the label what the recommended serving size is. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm thinking with chips, for example, the serving size might be like 17 chips. But if you're having maybe triple that, that would kind of count as 3 servings. So I just wanted to mention the Brain Health Food Guide, and this is a free resource. I'll pop it in the chat at the end of my presentation today, so you have easy access to it. But all of the foods that I've mentioned so far are in the Brain Health Food Guide with the serving sizes and everything. And so the serving sizes that I mentioned today, one of the reasons they were a bit of a range is because I used the serving sizes from the Mind Diet as well as the Brain Health Food Guide and also just general knowledge. And so that's why there was a bit of a range, but I highly recommend this resource. It was created by a number of Canadian researchers, I believe in Toronto, and so highly recommend. So what about supplements for brain health? We've talked all about foods. But what about supplements? So at this time, there's insufficient research to recommend specific nutrient supplements for brain health. However, it's important to correct nutrient deficiencies, for example, vitamin D deficiency, iron, B12 deficiency, etc. So, that would be individualized based on your own blood work, but there's some evidence to suggest that having vitamin D deficiency is linked to a more negative effect on brain health. In Canada, there are some recommendations across the board for supplements. So individuals over 50 are recommended to take a vitamin D supplement every day. Especially in Canada, it's dark here like 8 months of the year. Like, we don't get enough sunshine. And, as you get older, your skin becomes less effective at making vitamin D from the sun, etc. So it's recommended to take at least 400 international units of vitamin D a day. You could take it 1,000 or 2,000, but you don't want to take more than 4,000 unless your doctor has told you otherwise, because there is an upper limit. And adults over 50 are also recommended to take a vitamin B12 supplement daily or eat foods fortified with vitamin B12. That's because, again, your body becomes less effective at absorbing vitamin B12 as you age. And so there's no real recommendation for the amount, really anywhere between maybe like 100 to 1,000 micrograms per day for a supplement. But there's no maximum amount for B12, so we're not as worried about that. Foods that are fortified with vitamin B12. So fortified means that there are nutrients added to the food that were not there before. And so certain plant-based milks, cereals, etc. are fortified with vitamin B12. And the supplements in fortified foods have the B12 in a different form than we find in foods. And so that's why it's more easily absorbed. And as we know, as we talked about today, vitamin D and vitamin B12 are both important for brain health. I'll also just say, if you don't eat fish regularly, taking an omega-3 supplement may be beneficial, to get that DHA and EPA that we talked about. The other type of omega-3, the ALA, that one we can find in plant-based foods. And so things like walnuts, canola oil, ground flax seeds, etc. But the DHA and the EPA we can really only get in fish. So if you're not eating the fish 2 to 3 times a week, it may be beneficial to take a supplement, but I always recommend food first. So if you like fish, and it's attainable to eat it 2 to 3 times a week, that would be better, in my opinion, than taking a supplement. And it may be helpful to take a daily multivitamin as well to ensure that you're getting all the nutrients you need each day. And that multivitamin would likely contain the vitamin D and B12 as well. So, if it does, then you could just take it all in a multivitamin. It likely won't have the omega 3s though. So now I'd like to share a couple of recipes for brain health. So the first is overnight oats. So there's two reasons I chose these recipes today. One is because they have a number of ingredients that are a part of that recommended foods list that we talked about. The other is because they're recipes that I personally eat all the time. And so I like them. And so I thought I'd share them. So overnight oats, if you're not familiar, basically you mix oats with a liquid and, any other optional ingredients. You soak it overnight or for 8 hours if you're wanting to eat it during the day. And then typically it's eaten cold and the oats, over that time soak up the liquid. So it's like a non-cooking method of eating oatmeal. You can heat it up if you like it hot. And there's no real nutritional benefit of overnight oats versus hot oats. Um, I just like it because they're quick and convenient, and I like the taste. So this recipe comes from Dairy Farmers of Canada. And so the ingredients are half a cup of large flake oats, 1/3 cup of milk, half a cup of yogurt, half a cup of strawberries, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And I'll pop this link in the chat as well so that you have the link to the recipe. You place all the ingredients in a jar or container, stir, or, if you're using a jar, you can cover, shake vigorously, refrigerate for 8 hours, keeps in the fridge for 3 days. So I usually like to make a couple at a time and then eat it over the course of a couple days. And I recommend this recipe because we have our whole grains with our large flake oats to get that fiber, milk and yogurt for that low fat dairy, especially the yogurt because it's fermented. And so it has that beneficial bacteria. And you could use strawberry yogurt, plain vanilla, whatever you prefer. And the strawberries, an easy way to get that half a cup of berries 2 to 3 times per week. And my next recipe is a quinoa salad. This recipe comes from Cookie and Kate. It yields 4 medium salads or 8 side salads. Again, I will put the recipe in the chat. Quinoa salad is something I eat on a regular basis. In fact, I have it today for lunch. I like to make up a batch and then have it for a few days. And again, it has a number of ingredients that are recommended as part of brain healthy eating. So I apologize for all the words on this slide, but I wanted all the ingredients to be in one place. So it contains quinoa, 1 can of chickpeas, a medium cucumber, red bell pepper, 3/4 cup chopped red onion, 1 cup of finely chopped flat leaf parsley, or you could use dried parsley, 1/4 cup of olive oil, 1/4 cup of lemon juice, 1 tablespoon red wine vinegar, 2 cloves of garlic pressed or minced, half a teaspoon fine sea salt, and freshly ground black pepper. So if we think about the beneficial foods in this recipe, we have quinoa, which is a whole grain, chickpeas, which are those legumes. So a nice easy way to get legumes in our diet. And we have lots of different non-starchy vegetables like cucumber, red bell pepper, red onion, etc. And we also have olive oil as part of the dressing here. And so for the instructions, you would want to cook the quinoa first. You could combine the rinsed quinoa and water in a saucepan, bring it to a medium-high heat, then decrease the heat to maintain a gentle simmer. Cook uncovered for about 15 minutes, and then remove and let it sit for about 5 minutes. And so you can always follow the directions on the package or use leftover quinoa, maybe that you made before. Combine the chickpeas, cucumber, bell pepper, onion, and parsley. And then in a separate small bowl, combine the olive oil, lemon juice, vinegar, garlic, and salt. And then once the quinoa is cooled, you can put it in the fridge to cool. You add it to a serving bowl, and then drizzle the dressing. Make sure you add all the veggies and everything, and then you can season with extra black pepper and a little bit of salt if needed. And you can let it rest for 5 to 10 minutes before serving. So now I'd just like to recap everything that we've talked about today. So nutrition plays an important role in the brain, such as by supporting the structure and function of the brain, as well as providing fuel to the brain. And virtually every nutrient supports brain health. As we talked about today, there's lots of different foods that are recommended. Pretty much every single nutrient plays a role. And so that's why it's important to eat a variety of foods every day. And every bite counts. Focus on eating those really nutrient dense foods rather than eating those foods that are more fast foods, highly processed. And dietary patterns that have been shown to slow cognitive decline include the Mediterranean way of eating, DASH diet, and MIND diet. Key recommended foods include green leafy vegetables, berries, whole grains, nuts and seeds, legumes, soy, eggs, fish, poultry, and olive oil. Foods to limit include fried foods and highly processed foods. No specific nutrient supplements are recommended for brain health. In Canada, though, adults over 50 are advised to take 400 international units of vitamin D daily and take a vitamin B12 supplement or eat vitamin B12 fortified foods or take a multivitamin that contains these nutrients. And if you don't eat fish regularly, then it may be beneficial to take an omega-3 supplement. And if you'd like further information or to schedule a one-on-one nutrition counseling appointment, you can always phone 226 388 4725 or email ipct-info@grchc.ca. You could also complete a self-referral form online. So on our website, Grand River Community Health Center, you can go under Your Health, Nutrition Counseling, and then our self-referral form is found there. But I want to thank everyone again for listening to my presentation today and joining, and I welcome any questions.